Okay, let's study the one application of the aggregate demand and aggregate supply the model. And in this case, we assume if the Federal Reserve increased the money supply, so what will happen to the aggregate output and average price level in the short run and in the long run? So before we answer the questions, we have to draw the aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve. Remember, when you solve this question, aggregate demand and the supply curve, the variable here on the vertical axis is average price level, and the variable on the horizontal axis is aggregate output. For the aggregate supply curve, we actually have two different types. One is the long run aggregate supply, which is the vertical curve. Short run aggregate supply is upward sloping curve. And the aggregate demand curve, and we know, is a downward sloping curve. So initially, we can assume all these three curves intersect at this point. This point, you can say, is the initial equilibrium point, or initial long run and short run equilibrium point. With this point, we can determine the initial price level and the initial output levels. So now comes the question: if a Fed uses expansionary monetary policy, what happened to the output and the price level in the short run, and what happened to them in the long run? So let's first study with the short run. In the short run, and we know expansionary monetary policy means the money supply increased. And in this case, the Federal Reserve inject the money into the system, so banks can lend out more loans to people. At the same time, the interest rate is pushed down. So with this, and everyone can imagine, use our model. Let's look at aggregate expenditure. With more loans available, with a lower level of interest rate, the personal consumption will go up because people will get more loans to buy the cars and houses. And the firm with the more loans and lower interest rate will make more investment. So aggregate expenditure increase, and this means the demand for the whole society goes up. So in the short run, the expansionary monetary policy will push the aggregate demand curve to the right. So that's the first step. So AD curve shift to right. And with the strong demand, the firms are going to increase the output to meet the stronger demand. But here comes the question: how can firms on average in the countries increase the output in the short run? In the short run, the best way to increase output is to hire more workers. Or you can ask the current workers to work more shifts. So both can help the firm increase output in the short run. So as a result, because of the shift of the aggregate demand curve to the right, let's go back to our graph. You can see in the short run, the new equilibrium point is here. And then we know short run output will go up and price will go up as well. So price go up and output increases. That's based on our model, the short run equilibrium point. But what happened to the long run? Can the economy stay on the point B here, short run equilibrium, for a long time? And we know previously, in order to meet the stronger demand, the firm will hire more workers or ask the workers to work more shifts. So in that case, you can imagine the demand for the labor is very strong. And the labor market becomes really tight. So which means it's very difficult for firms to hire more workers. But in order to get the workers they want, firm has to increase the wage or salary to hire more workers. So that means the cost of the labor goes up. If the cost of the labor goes up, in order to cover the higher cost, the firm has to increase the price of the output they sell to keep the same level of the profit. So as a result, you can imagine, if every firm do something like this in the long run or in the whole society, the average price level is up. If average price level up, what happened? Yeah, go back to the liquidity preference model. The interest rate, real money balance, real money supply, and real money money demand. So if the price level up, and we already know real money supply will go down because the denominator increased. So the whole curve will shift to the left with a new level of the price. So using the liquidity preference model, we know the interest rate in the society will go up. Because interest rate go up, cost of the borrowing go up, the consumption will go down, and investment go down as well. So as a result, we can see here the aggregate expenditure start to go down after average price level increase, because the reduction in the consumption and the investment. So as a result, the output of the whole society start to reduce. So now the society will move from B actually to C level. Or we can imagine, because the cost of the labor or input increased, and we started the shift of the short-run aggregate supply. The short-run aggregate supply actually will go down, shift to the left. So back to our graph. After labor market became really tight, wage increase, salary increase, the short-run aggregate supply curve will shift to the left. So the whole economy will move from the B to the new equilibrium point C here. So now we actually can get a conclusion. After short run aggregate supply curve shift to left, and we can see from the graph the price will continue to increase, but at the same time, and we see the output both from the graph or from this equation, output will reduce. So output will go back to the equilibrium point. What would be the conclusion here? The conclusion here is, in the short run, both price level and the output level will increase in the society. But in the long run, only price level go up, but the output actually will go back to the initial equilibrium point. So here comes the question. Does an expansionary monetary policy have an impact in the GDP in the short run? The answer is yes. In the short run, when the economy moves from A to B, output will increase. But does the expansionary monetary policy have an impact on the output in the long run? And we know the economy actually will move back from B to C, so answer is no. So the monetary policy has no impact on the aggregate output in the long run. This means what? Monetary policy has no impact, has no effect. That's the reason economists say money is neutral. Or we said monetary neutrality. In the long run, and we actually can use the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model to explain the monetary neutrality in the long run. So here is our model.